The letter came on a Monday. It was raining. And looking back now, that was the day my silence began. I didn't speak of it for 70 years. My name is Henry James Wallace, but you can call me Hank. That's what my friends used to call me, back before all this. I was born in 1926 and grew up in a small town in Indiana. Son of hard-working folks, the real kind. My father, Clarence, fixed cars since before I can remember. My mother, Eleanor, sewed dresses for the neighbors and still found time to teach math to 5 kids. I was the oldest, which meant I got in the most trouble, but I was also the one she trusted most. My childhood smelled like warm bread and engine grease. We played ball in the backyard with socks rolled into a mitt, listened to the radio after dinner, and ran barefoot until the sun went down. My dad used to tell stories about the Great War. He didn't fight in it, but he said he knew men who did, and he always said the same thing. Nobody comes back the same. I was just a kid, thought he was being dramatic. War seemed far away. Black and white movie stuff, until the radio spoke of Pearl Harbor. And everything changed. I was 17, and it was like the whole country got angry at once. People lining up to enlist, flags on every porch, everyone singing the anthem like it was a vow. I tried to sign up early. My mother dragged me back home by the collar, said as long as I lived under her roof, I'd wait for the draft. So I waited. The day I turned 18, the letter came. I'm not sure if I felt fear or pride. Maybe both. I kept the letter under my pillow for 2 days before telling anyone. On the 3rd night, my father walked into my room without knocking, sat down on the edge of my bed and said, "Hank, when you go, come back a man. But don't forget the boy you were." I didn't understand then. I do now. I reported to Evansville. They gave me a uniform, shaved my head, handed me a heavy backpack, and yelled in my ear for weeks. They called it training, but it felt more like breaking you down from the inside. The instructor, Sergeant Brooks, said we had to forget our names, our faces, and especially our fear. Fear kills more men than bullets, he'd say. But truth is, we were all afraid. We just learned not to show it. I was placed in the 116th Infantry Regiment, boarded a ship to England. Cold, rocking seas, vomit, nerves, the smell of men too young to understand what they were about to do. They told us we'd train with the Brits. Next thing we knew, we were set to invade France. It still didn't feel real, until I saw the map. Omaha Beach. I'll never forget that name. The night before the landing, I sat with 2 guys from my unit, Billy and Carter. Billy was from Texas, loud and always cracking jokes. Carter was from North Carolina, quiet, serious eyes. None of us slept. We just stared at the water, trying to laugh about anything. Billy said if he died, he wanted to be buried with his left boot pointing at the moon. Carter didn't say a word. Then the sun came up. June, 1944. The longest day of my life. The boat shook. The sky was gray, but no rain. The noise was a mix of motors, waves, and prayer. Some kissed medals on their necks, others scribbled notes like it was their last breath. I just shook. Tried to remember my mother's face, but even that felt far away. Like my mind had jumped out of my body. When the ramp dropped, hell broke loose. Bullets cutting the air, screams, water turning red. No time to think. I ran, slipped, fired, prayed, all at once. I saw Billy go down. 1 second he was laughing, the next his face was gone. Carter vanished in the smoke. I still don't know what happened to him. I dove behind a chunk of broken concrete half buried in the sand, and stayed there for hours. I don't know how many. The sound of gunfire felt like it was inside my skull. I saw men trying to run, being hit, dropping. I tried to move, but my legs locked up. Not from injury, from fear. A fear that freezes you from the inside out. When I finally crawled out of there, it was nearly dark. I dragged myself to a makeshift shelter made from parts of a blown-up tank and dead men. A sergeant with blood pouring from his arm pulled me inside. He said, "You're alive, kid. That's already more than half of them out there." All I could think about was Billy's boot. I never found it. Or him. That was the first time I almost didn't come back. And I'm not talking about the war. I mean me. A part of me stayed on that beach. A part I never found again. In the weeks that followed, we pushed through destroyed villages, muddy fields, and dark woods. Death became part of the landscape, a smell that clung to your clothes, a taste of metal in your mouth. Sometimes the silence between battles was worse than the gunfire. That's when the memories crept in. After 4 months on the front, I got hit in the leg by shrapnel. Nothing fatal. They pulled me out and sent me to a field hospital behind the lines. Lying there on a dirty cot surrounded by wounded men groaning and whispering, I started writing a letter to my mother. I stopped halfway. Never finished. I said I was fine. But it was a lie. I came home 2 years later. No one knew what I'd seen. And I didn't tell them. Not when I got off the train, not in the years that followed. I got married, had 2 kids, worked in a garage like my dad, smiled for photos, told jokes at Christmas. But inside, a part of me was still crouching behind that concrete slab, legs frozen, soul gone quiet. My wife used to ask me sometimes, "What did you see over there?" I'd say, "Nothing worth remembering." But that wasn't true. I just didn't want her to see what it had done to me. And she respected the silence. I stayed quiet for more than 70 years, until one day, my grandson asked me, "Grandpa, did you ever kill someone?" I couldn't lie. Couldn't answer either. I just cried. He didn't understand. But that was the moment I knew. Maybe it was time to speak. Not for me. For those who can't. Because forgetting is how it happens again. And there's more. So much more. But I'll tell it slow. If you've got the heart to listen. Listen to the whole story. And then tell me, what would you have done in my place? And tell me, where are you hearing me from? When the ramp dropped, there was no time to think. The sound outside was louder than anything I'd ever heard in my life. Machine guns, mortars, screaming, all at once. The ocean sprayed warm on my face, and it wasn't from the sun. It was blood, from the men in front of us. A kid next to me got hit before he even stepped out. Bullet straight through the helmet. His body just folded back. We didn't even flinch. We couldn't. My name is Hank Wallace. If you heard the beginning of my story, you already know. I was just a small-town kid from Indiana, fixing bikes and tossing a ball around with my brothers. But that morning, on the coast of Normandy, my childhood ended, and it didn't fade away. It exploded. The commander shouted for us to move, and the first thing I thought was, "This is madness. This is suicide." But we jumped anyway. Not out of bravery. Instinct. If you stayed in the boat, you were a target. If you ran forward, at least there was a chance. The water came up to my chest. My uniform was soaked, dragging me down like it wanted to keep me there. And everything around us was falling apart. The beach felt miles away. Between us and that sand, only explosions, twisted metal, and bodies floating face down. I ran, or tried to. I slipped, stumbled, nearly drowned. I saw a man lose his leg to a mine, another trying to scream without a mouth. But the sound that stuck with me was someone calling for their mother. I don't know where it came from, but I still hear it. When I finally reached the edge of the beach, I dove behind a tangle of barbed wire, took my first real breath in minutes, and that's when I realized I was alone. My unit had been scattered. We were supposed to move together, stick to a formation. But on that beach, there was no plan. Only chaos. You looked left, you saw someone get hit. You looked right, and there was no one left. Bullets tore through the air like hornets. Fast. Angry. I pressed my face into the sand. It was wet, gritty, smelled like iron and smoke. I don't know how long I stayed there. Time stopped making sense. I couldn't lift my head without seeing death in every direction. Then, a voice, someone shouting my name. "Hank!" I turned just enough to see Carter, the quiet one from North Carolina. His face was covered in mud and ash. He crawled toward me, dragging another man by the collar. That man, a radio operator, was missing half his leg. Carter dropped next to me, panting hard. "We need to move. We stay here. We die here." I nodded. My body didn't want to move, but it had to. We waited for a break in the gunfire, just a second of hesitation, and then we ran. We ran like the ground behind us was on fire. I didn't even feel my feet hit the sand. Just raw fear, adrenaline, and the weight of the rifle slamming into my side with every step. We ducked into a crater, probably from a mortar shell. Inside, 3 other soldiers, one of them barely more than a boy, were huddled together. One was whispering a prayer. Another had his hands clamped to his ears, eyes wide and empty. No one talked much. We just nodded, checked our ammo, waited for the next move. Every few minutes, someone would pop up to get a look, and sometimes they didn't come back down. At one point, a medic, I never knew his name, crawled in beside us. He looked exhausted, said he'd been pulling men off the beach since dawn. His hands were covered in blood, that wasn't his. He handed me a pack of morphine. "If I don't make it back, give it to whoever needs it most." I wanted to say something. Thank you, maybe, but nothing came out. My throat was dry, my mouth full of sand and silence. Then, the tanks came. You can't imagine the sound. The metal tracks grinding, the shells firing, the ground shaking, our own tanks pushing through the obstacles, forcing a path. The moment we saw one roll past the ridge, it was like someone lit a fire under us. Carter yelled, "Now!" We scrambled up, dashed behind the tank as it moved, using it as cover. Bullets pinged off the armor like hail on a tin roof. At one point, the tank stopped. Too much debris ahead. We had to split off. I lost Carter again in that moment. I kept running, found a half-collapsed structure, maybe a German pillbox hit by our artillery, crawled inside. It was dark, filled with smoke and dust. Inside, 2 soldiers I didn't know were reloading, covered in grime. One looked up and nodded. "We hold here," he said, "until someone tells us we can move." But no one came. No officer, no signal. Just more noise, more waiting, more death. Hours passed, maybe the whole day. I don't remember eating, don't remember drinking, just waiting. At some point I realized my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't hold my weapon straight. And then it got quiet. Not peace, not safety, just less noise. Enough to hear your heartbeat again. Enough to hear the breathing of the men beside you. Enough to remember you were alive. We pushed forward inch by inch, hill by hill. By the time the beach was secured, most of the faces I started with were gone. Billy, the one who joked about his boot pointing to the moon, I never saw again. Carter. I didn't know if he made it, not yet, and I didn't have the strength to ask. That night, we slept on the dirt. No blankets, no light, just the weight of what we'd seen. The sand still stuck to my skin, and the blood, not mine, dried into my sleeves. You'd think the worst was over. That surviving Omaha Beach meant you'd made it through the worst of it. But the truth is, that was just the beginning. They say once you survive a landing like Omaha, nothing else scares you. That's a lie. What came after was worse in a different way. Quieter, slower, but it got under your skin. We moved inland the morning after. No more open beaches, no crashing waves, no machine gun nests carved into the cliffs. Just hedgerows, farmland, and villages torn in half. Places where people once lived, where they probably still did, hiding in cellars or ruins. You could feel it in the air. Not peace, but the echo of something that used to be normal. I walked through a town called Colville. I remember the name because it was written on a broken sign, half hanging off a stone wall. There wasn't much left. Some walls, some roofs blown open like cracked eggshells, smoke still rising. The smell, God, I'll never forget it. Not just burning wood, flesh, hair, wet earth mixed with something sour, something human. We weren't fighting anyone in that moment. No shots fired, just the silence of passing through something sacred that had been broken. A woman stood by what used to be her front door. No words, just stared at us as we marched by like ghosts in green. She held a child on her hip. The child looked straight at me, not scared, just empty, like the war had already passed through her, too. I remember thinking, we don't belong here. Not just me, not my unit, none of us. No army should ever step through a front yard with that kind of pain in the air. Carter found me later that day. I thought he was gone. When he walked up, covered in dust, his helmet hanging off the side of his pack, I couldn't even speak. We just looked at each other. I think that moment was the closest I ever came to crying during the war. We didn't talk much. Just sat against a half-collapsed wall, chewing stale rations. He handed me a cigarette. I didn't smoke before the war. Started that day, not for the taste, for the quiet it gave you between thoughts. That night, we dug in on a ridge outside a village. We were told the Germans had fallen back, but no one really believed it. Everyone knew the enemy didn't disappear. They just waited. In the dark, I heard footsteps. Not enemy. Friendly. A private I didn't know came into our foxhole with a sack. Inside were family photos, burnt around the edges. Found them in a bombed house, he said. He asked if I wanted to take one. They don't need 'em anymore, he said. I told him to get the hell out. That was the first time I felt something different in me. Not fear, not anger, just disgust. Like I didn't recognize the person next to me. Like we'd all started to turn into something else. Something not quite human anymore. The next few days blurred. Mud, marching, exhaustion. We slept standing up. Sometimes didn't sleep at all. You started to smell yourself. Your own skin turning sour. Your boots soaked with things you didn't ask about. Time stopped working. Days felt like weeks. Nights stretched forever. One morning, we walked into a clearing. and saw what was left of a skirmish. Not ours, not theirs. Civilians, 3 of them. A man, a woman, and a boy, maybe 12 years old. Lying face down near a broken cart. No uniforms, no weapons, no reason. Carter knelt beside the boy, checked for signs of life, then just sat there. Didn't speak for hours after. Neither did I. We didn't bury them. Couldn't. Orders were to keep moving. We left them like furniture someone forgot. And I've hated that decision every day since. People think the trauma comes from battle, from the bullets and bombs, and yeah, that's part of it. But for me, it was that boy, that silence, that choice to keep walking. That's what stayed. I started carrying a notebook around that time. Not to write stories or letters, just numbers, names, bits of details I didn't want to forget. I never showed it to anyone, kept it in my front pocket. It got soaked in the rain, stained with mud. One time a bullet passed so close it tore the edge of the cover. That book saved my life once, but I'll tell you that later. Back in Indiana, I used to believe in fairness. That if you worked hard and treated people right, life gave you something decent back. Out here, there was no such thing. Good men died fast. Bad ones lived. Civilians got caught in the middle, and you stopped asking why, because the answer never came. One evening, we bivouacked in a forest. Quiet place, thick trees, almost peaceful. I sat watch with Carter. He stared up at the canopy and whispered, "You think they remember us when we go, or are we just numbers?" I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. It was easier than lying. That night I dreamed of home, my mother cooking, my brothers chasing fireflies, and then the dream shifted. And I was back on the beach, dragging Billy by the arm, but his face was gone, just blank skin where his eyes used to be. I woke up choking, not from fear, from the smell, my own sweat, my own memory. From that point on, I started feeling things differently. Every noise made me flinch. Every innocent face made me wonder how much longer I could do this. And still, the war wasn't done. Not even close. We hadn't reached Germany. We hadn't seen the forests of the Ardennes, hadn't yet faced the snow, the starvation, the real breaking point. But something had already cracked in me. Something small. A hairline fracture. I didn't know it yet, but that crack would grow, and no one noticed. Not even me. By the time we reached Belgium, it wasn't the bullets I feared anymore. It was the cold. That kind of cold that doesn't just bite your skin. It seeps in, into your bones, into your thoughts, into the spaces in you that used to feel warm. We'd been marching for days, sleeping when we could, eating what we found. Supplies came late or not at all. Our boots were wet more often than they were dry, socks stiff with frost, fingers numb. Rifles jammed from the cold if you didn't clean them every few hours. We learned fast. If the weather didn't kill you, neglect would. The forests were quiet, but not peaceful. That silence in the snow, it played tricks on you. You'd think you heard someone breathing behind a tree, a footstep that wasn't yours, a whisper. It made you nervous, made your mind stretch itself thin, trying to fill in the silence with something it could understand. We lost a man one night. Frostbite turned to infection. He didn't even scream, just faded, wrapped in his coat, teeth clenched. By the time the medic checked on him, he was gone. I didn't know his name. That started happening a lot. Faces came and went too fast for names to matter. You'd share a cigarette with a guy one day, step over his body the next. Carter and I tried to stick close. We weren't assigned together anymore, not officially, but no one stopped us. In that kind of cold, having someone beside you mattered, even if neither of you spoke. He started talking less. I did too. There were days we said nothing at all, just shared a look when someone didn't wake up, or when mail came and our names weren't called. You stop expecting things after a while. You stop hoping. You just try not to think. One night I took first watch, sat under a pine, back against the trunk, my rifle across my lap, half asleep, half frozen, and I saw something, or maybe I imagined it. A figure, far off in the trees, unmoving, not walking, just standing there, in the snow, staring, no weapon, no coat, nothing. I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't tell Carter, or anyone. Thought maybe I was just tired. But I saw it again 2 nights later. Same shape, same stare. And that's when I started wondering if the cold had cracked something in me. Rations got tighter. 1 meal a day, if that. The snow made everything slower. Movement, decisions, thinking. The Germans had the advantage. They were dug in, hidden, and they knew the terrain. We were walking blind. Every step a risk. Some of the guys started tying string to each other's packs so we wouldn't get separated in the whiteout, and then came Bastogne. We were told we'd be resting, that we'd rotate out. That turned out to be a lie. Instead, we were surrounded, supplies cut off, shells rained down every few hours. The snow turned red and black. We dug into frozen earth with whatever we had, shovels, helmets, bare hands. You didn't feel the pain at first, only later, when the shaking started, when your body remembered it was human. Inside the foxholes we huddled, wrapped in anything that held heat, torn blankets, extra shirts, scraps of canvas. I remember looking at Carter's hands one night, purple at the fingertips, skin cracked open. He didn't notice, didn't care. I gave him my gloves. He didn't thank me, just put them on. That was enough. I stopped writing in my notebook. Pages were wet, smeared. My hands couldn't hold a pencil straight, and honestly, I didn't want to record what I was seeing, what I was feeling, because it wasn't bravery, it wasn't honor, it was survival, ugly, desperate, freezing survival. One morning, a new lieutenant walked into our trench. Young, clean uniform, barely any dirt on his boots. He ordered us to prepare for engagement. Carter laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "We are the engagement," he muttered. The lieutenant didn't respond. He just moved on. 2 hours later, we were shelled again. I got buried halfway in the blast. Dirt and snow collapsed on top of me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. All I could hear was ringing, and then muffled yelling. I thought that was it. Then Carter's hands, digging me out. No words, just urgency. He pulled me free, dragged me to cover, and slapped my face until I gasped again. I remember coughing dirt, snot, maybe a tooth. He sat back, nodded once, and went quiet again. That night, we found shelter in a collapsed barn. Just a roof and 3 walls left. But no snow inside, no wind, a small mercy. There was a cow, dead for days, frozen solid. We didn't touch it, not because of the smell, because it looked peaceful, and we didn't want to ruin that. I couldn't sleep. Not because of noise, because of silence. That same figure, the one from the forest, I saw it again, just standing there, across the field, still, watching. I didn't blink this time. I just stared back, until Carter spoke, barely above a whisper. "I see him too." And I knew then. It wasn't just me. Whatever we were becoming, whatever this war was turning us into, it wasn't in the blood or the uniforms or the battles. It was in the quiet, the places between the gunfire, where no one was looking. That's where the damage settled in. After Bastogne, I was never the same. None of us were. We walked slower, talked less, started doing things automatically, not from training, from numbness, from needing to not feel anything else. And that, I think, was the real war. We were near the German border. February 1945. Cold still clung to everything, but the snow had started to turn to mud. Thick, ugly mud that swallowed boots and slowed every step like it wanted to drag us down with it. The trees were thinner here, broken by artillery, and the hills rolled out like the war was stretching itself longer on purpose. That day started like any other. We were low on ammo, low on food, low on anything that made you feel human. But we had orders: push forward, secure the ridge, enemy presence, uncertain. That was the word they used, uncertain. Like that ever meant something. We were 12 men. By the end of the day, we'd be 6. The ridge was about 400 yards out. Not far. But in that terrain, under fire, it may as well have been miles. We split into 2 groups. Carter was with me. We were always together, when we could be. The 2 others in our group were Private Mallory, a kid from Chicago, barely shaving, and Sergeant Keating, career Army, eyes like stone. Keating didn't talk much, but when he did, it was orders. Clear, sharp, no hesitation. About halfway up the slope, gunfire erupted from the left tree line. It was fast, clean, aimed. Not panicked, not a patrol, an ambush. Keating went down first, neck, didn't even scream. Just dropped. Mallory froze. I shouted for him to move, but he was staring at Keating like his brain had shut off. I grabbed his arm, yanked him down into a shallow ditch. Bullets snapped over us like cracking knuckles. Carter had made it to the next cover point, a broken tree trunk ahead, and he was yelling something I couldn't hear over the gunfire. We had no good options. The ridge was still too far. Retreat meant crossing open ground under fire. We were pinned. Carter started firing back, measured, focused shots, trying to draw attention. I knew what he was doing, trying to buy us time. Then it happened. A grenade landed maybe 6 feet from us. I saw it hit the mud, saw the metal flash. I shoved Mallory, tried to get both of us clear, but only one of us moved fast enough. The explosion lifted me, ears gone, vision white. I landed hard, mouth full of dirt, left arm numb. I rolled over and saw Mallory, torn open, chest rising, barely. He was alive, but not for long. He looked at me. His mouth moved, but no sound came out, just a gurgle. His hand reached out, grabbed my sleeve. Then the radio crackled. "Carter, we have to move, Hank. Now! We have one shot!" I looked at Mallory. I looked at Carter, waving from cover. I looked at the smoke creeping through the trees, and I made a decision I still carry like shrapnel in my chest. I let go. I let Mallory's hand fall. And I ran. I ran like the whole damn war was behind me. Carter pulled me behind the trunk. We moved fast, flanking right, found the shooters, took 2 out, wounded the 3rd. When it was over, I was covered in sweat and blood that wasn't mine. But I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like a coward. Back at camp that night, I couldn't sleep. Carter didn't say a word. He didn't ask. He didn't have to. He saw it in my face, and I saw it in his. That I'd done the only thing I could, and that it still wasn't enough. They recovered Mallory's body 2 days later. The chaplain asked if anyone wanted to say anything. I didn't speak. I couldn't. What was I going to say? That I'd held his arm while he died and then left him there? I started having dreams after that. Not of the grenade, not of the gunfire, of his hand, holding onto mine, tight, and then slipping away. Sometimes I'd wake up with my hand clenched so hard my nails dug into my skin. Carter tried to talk about it once. We were cleaning rifles by lantern light. He said, "You saved my life that day. You did what you had to." I didn't answer, because in my head, that wasn't what I did. What I did was leave someone behind, alive. And that's a weight you don't drop. You carry it, silently, through medals, through parades, through barbecues where nobody knows what you did to make it back. And the worst part? People call you a hero for it. The last thing I felt was heroic. After that day, something in me shut down. I went through the motions. I fought. I followed orders. I survived. But I stopped feeling like a person, just a uniform moving through space. You can't fight a war without losing something. But they don't tell you that sometimes the thing you lose is the part of you that forgives yourself. The war ended on paper before it ended in my head. I came home in the spring of 1946, got off the train in Indiana wearing my uniform, boots still caked with European mud. There was a banner on Main Street, something about heroes. A few folks clapped, a couple waved flags. I smiled. That's what you do. Smile, nod, keep walking. My mother hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. My father stood behind her, hands in his pockets. Didn't say much, but his eyes said everything. Pride, maybe. Relief. A question he didn't know how to ask. Home smelled like soap and bread. My room was just like I left it. Baseball glove on the shelf. Books lined up by size. My youngest brother, now taller than me, stared like I was something between a ghost and a stranger. I was 20, but I felt older than my father. At dinner, my mother served meatloaf and potatoes like she always did. I tried to eat. Couldn't taste a thing. Every noise, fork clink, chair scrape, radio hum, felt too loud. I flinched when the back door slammed. My mother asked if I was okay. I told her I was tired. I was always tired. The town hadn't changed, but I had. The streets felt smaller, the people slower. I couldn't stand crowds, or silence, or fireworks. The 4th of July came and I locked myself in the garage. Every pop made my heart jump like it was back in Belgium. I got a job at the garage with my dad. Fixing engines helped. It was quiet work. Focused. Things made sense. If it's broken, you fix it. But people weren't that simple. They'd ask, "So what was it like over there?" With a kind of curiosity that made me sick, like it was a story to be told around a campfire. I'd shrug and say, "Cold, long, loud," then change the subject. I started carrying that notebook again. The one from the war. I didn't write much in it, just words, 1 or 2 at a time. Smoke, frozen, boot print, things that wouldn't leave my mind. My mother found it once, asked what it was. I said nothing. I met a girl, Sarah. She was kind, patient, asked if I wanted to go dancing. I said I didn't dance. She laughed and said, "Then we'll sit and talk." We did, a lot. She never pushed. I think that's why I married her. We had 2 kids, both boys. I named the first one Carter. But I didn't tell him why. Being a father was strange. beautiful, terrifying. Every time they cried in the night, I jolted awake like a shell had landed. My wife would put a hand on my chest, whisper, "It's okay, it's just the baby." I'd nod, but my heart would still be hammering like I was back in a foxhole. I didn't tell stories, didn't hang medals, didn't talk about the guys I left behind. Sometimes I'd stare at the wall for hours, just stuck, not thinking, not feeling, just remembering things I wasn't trying to remember. Sarah asked once, softly, "Are you ever going to talk about it?" And I said, "If I do, I might not stop." So I didn't. I buried it. Deep. I went to church, cooked burgers on the grill, helped the neighbors build a fence, did everything a normal man does, and still, I felt like I was watching my own life from across the street. One night, I was putting my youngest to bed. He must have been 5. He looked up at me and asked, "Did you ever kill anyone, Daddy?" I froze, felt the blood leave my hands. I wanted to lie, wanted to say no, but the words stuck, so I said, "Let's just hope you never have to find out what that feels like." He nodded. Didn't understand. I barely did. Decades passed. The hair grayed. The house got quieter. The boys grew up, moved away, had kids of their own. I sat on the porch most days, drank coffee, watched the wind move through the cornfields. Tried not to think about the beach, or the snow, or the boy I let go of in Germany. Sometimes I saw their faces in the people I passed on the street. Billy's smile in a gas station clerk. Carter's stare in a bus driver. Mallory's eyes in a boy crossing the street with a backpack too big for him. And it hurt, because they didn't get this far. But I did, and I still didn't know why. They gave me medals, said I was brave, that I served with honor. But all I ever felt was that I survived. And surviving, some days, is the heaviest thing you carry. It had been over 40 years since I'd worn the uniform. By then, my sons were grown. My wife and I had retired. Most days were simple. Coffee in the morning, light radio, reading the paper front to back. Sometimes I'd drive out to the old hardware store just to walk the aisles and feel the weight of tools in my hands. It kept the mind occupied. I never talked about the war. Not at church. Not at family dinners. Not even when the grandkids asked, "Grandpa, were you a soldier?" I'd nod and say, "A long time ago." Then I'd change the subject. But that day, the one that changed everything, it started like any other. I'd gone to the post office. Small building, 2 windows, smelled like ink and dust. I was waiting in line when I noticed a man a few spots ahead of me. Something about his posture, his haircut. Short, military tight, even though his hair was mostly gray. He turned around at one point, casually scanning the line, and I froze. The eyes. I knew those eyes. It couldn't be, but it was. Carter. 40 years had passed, but my body recognized him before my mind did. I felt a jolt through my chest like my heart was waking up from sleep. My throat closed. I tried to call his name. Nothing came out. He didn't see me at first, just turned back around, chatting with the clerk. I stepped forward slowly. My boots suddenly felt heavy. I was afraid, and I'd face machine guns. I tapped his shoulder. He turned, eyebrows furrowed. Then his face changed. Not a smile, not shock, just understanding. Like he'd been waiting for this too. He whispered, "Hank?" I nodded, and he pulled me into a hug before I could stop shaking. We didn't say much there. Just stood. 2 old men, in a quiet post office, holding on to a piece of time neither of us knew we still had. We went to a diner after, sat in the back booth like teenagers on leave. He looked thinner, older, but his voice, that steady, low drawl, was the same. "You never reached out," he said. I looked down at the coffee between us. Didn't know if I deserved to. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I figured." Then silence, but it wasn't heavy. It was full. Finally he asked me, "Do you ever think about that day, the ridge?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. He saw it in my face. "I remember Mallory's hand," I said, voice barely above a whisper. Carter looked at me for a long time. "You did what you had to." "No," I said. "I did what I could. It wasn't enough." He sat back, let out a long breath. "I carried that too, you know. Thought maybe if I'd fired faster, maybe if I'd covered better." We both stared out the window. Rain had started. The sound of it on the glass pulled us back. "I never told anyone," I said. "Not my wife, not my kids." "Me neither," he said. "Until my granddaughter asked me if I'd ever been scared." He laughed, but it cracked halfway. "I told her every day I came home." And I understood him completely. That's when it happened. A young man, no more than 20, in a faded army recruiter shirt came by the table. He must have overheard us. "Excuse me," he said. "Sorry to interrupt. Were you both in the war?" We looked at each other. Carter nodded slowly. "Yeah, we were." The kid's face lit up, like he'd just spotted real heroes in the wild. "My grandpa served too. I'm thinking about joining. Any advice?" Carter gestured toward me. "He's got more than I do." The kid turned to me, smiling, expecting something, anything. And I opened my mouth, and something in me cracked. I looked him in the eye and said, "Don't ever confuse survival with glory." He blinked. The smile faded a little. I leaned in, voice steady. "And if you go, don't come back quiet. Talk about it, even if it's hard, especially if it's hard." He nodded, unsure. "Thank you, sir." He walked away. I stared at Carter, and I felt it. Something shift, like a door opening inside me I didn't even remember locking. I went home that night and sat on the porch, didn't turn on the TV, didn't open a book, just sat. And for the first time, I told my wife what happened on the ridge, about Mallory, about the choice, about the face I still saw some nights. She held my hand the whole time, didn't interrupt, didn't cry. When I finished, she kissed my knuckles and said, "You've been carrying that alone too long." She was right. I still carry it. But it's lighter now. Because silence is heavy, and talking, even if it hurts, is how you start to heal. I told myself I'd never go back. Not to Europe, not to the beaches, not to the forest where the snow had teeth, not to the fields where friends turned into names on stone. I had left all of that behind. Or at least, that's what I believed. But time has a way of bringing things full circle. It was my granddaughter, of all people, who asked. We were looking through old boxes in the attic, searching for a photo album, and she found a patch from my old uniform. She didn't even know what it was. "What's this, Grandpa?" I told her it was from the war. She asked me where I'd been. I said, "France, Belgium, Germany." She asked if I'd ever wanted to go back. I shook my head. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling fan turning slow above our bed and thought about Omaha Beach. I thought about that field in Belgium where we lost 3 men in under an hour. I thought about the barn that kept us warm for a single night when warmth felt like mercy. I thought about the ridge. I thought about Mallory. And I realized something. I hadn't avoided those places out of fear. I'd avoided them out of guilt. But guilt is a shadow that follows you anyway. So the next morning, I told Sarah I was thinking about going. She looked at me for a long time. Then she smiled, soft, sad. "If you're ready," she said. I wasn't, but I went anyway. I didn't go with a tour group, didn't want a flag-waving history lesson. I wanted quiet. I wanted to walk where I had bled and see if the earth remembered. I flew to Paris, then took a train north. First stop, Normandy. Omaha Beach. It was different, of course. Paved paths, markers, people with cameras and sun hats. But the sea hadn't changed. Still the same endless gray-blue, still the same wind. I walked down the sand, slowly. I stood where I had once crawled, where I had tasted salt and blood and fear. I closed my eyes and listened. There were children laughing somewhere, seagulls crying, waves pulling back like breath. But underneath that, in the back of my mind, I still heard the gunfire. I still saw Billy's body disappear into the surf. I still felt the weight of my rifle, the sting of shrapnel near my ankle. I stood there for a long time, not moving. At one point, a man came up beside me. He wore a baseball cap that said 101st Airborne, looked about my age. He didn't say anything, just nodded. I nodded back. We stood together in silence, strangers who didn't need to explain anything. Then he said, "You lose someone here?" I said, "Yeah." "A few." He didn't ask names, just patted my shoulder and said, "They'd be proud you came back." I wanted to believe him. After Normandy, I went east, took a quiet train through Belgium, got off near the Ardennes, rented a car, drove out to the woods. I had no map, just memory. And even that was unreliable. Trees don't stay the same, neither do roads. But somehow, my feet knew where to go. I found the edge of a clearing. I knew that hill. I remembered the angle of the slope. The silence. I stood there, alone, in the exact place where I had seen Mallory's blood soak into the snow. And I said his name out loud. Mallory. Just that, nothing else. The wind moved through the trees. Leaves whispered like voices too far to understand. I took something out of my coat, a small piece of folded paper. I'd written his name and the date. I didn't know what else to do with it, so I buried it under a rock at the base of a tree. My hands shook as I did it. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe not. I didn't cry. I thought I might. But I didn't. I just stood there and let the weight settle the way it always had. But for the first time, it didn't crush me. It just sat beside me, like an old friend you stopped running from. On my last day, I visited a cemetery. Rows and rows of white crosses and stars of David, perfectly spaced, perfectly clean. I walked between them, reading names. I didn't find Billy. I didn't find Carter, because Carter made it home. But I found faces in the names I didn't know, and I thanked them, all of them, because I'd made it. I got to be an old man. I got to drink coffee on the porch and hear my wife hum while folding laundry. I got to hold my sons and name a boy after the man who saved me, and I finally understood something. The war didn't end. Not really. It lives in us. In the silence. In the wait. In the way we flinch at sudden sounds and stare too long at nothing. But going back didn't break me. It reminded me that I survived, that I did the best I could with what I had, and that maybe, just maybe, that was enough. I came back different, not in a dramatic way. No one else noticed, not at first. But Sarah did. She saw it in how I stood at the sink a little longer, in how I looked out the window and didn't flinch when a truck backfired. She saw it in how I touched her hand without looking away. Something in me had loosened. Not disappeared, but shifted, like a knot finally learning how to breathe. A week after I got back, my son came by to help with some yard work. He's in his 50s now, gray in the beard, always busy, always kind. He's asked me over the years here and there about the war. I never gave him much. Not because I didn't trust him, because I didn't trust myself. I didn't know how to say the things I'd kept buried. Without tearing something open I couldn't close again. But that day, while we were trimming branches near the fence line, he asked again. "How was the trip, Dad?" I said. "It was harder than I expected." He nodded. "You saw the beach again?" I said. "Yes." Then he paused, looked down at the clippers in his hand, then back at me. "Do you want to talk about it? I mean, about any of it?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw that he wasn't asking out of curiosity. He was offering a place to put something heavy, a space, a light left on. I sat down on the porch step. He sat next to me, and for the first time in my life, I told my son the truth. I told him about the boat ramp dropping, about Billy, about the scream I never found the source of, about Carter, and the foxholes, and the frostbitten hands, about the grenade, about Mallory's hand holding onto mine, about how I let go. I didn't sugarcoat it, didn't try to make it sound noble. I told it how it was, messy, ugly, human. I told him how I stopped sleeping normally for 10 years, how I smiled in every family photo while part of me was still crawling through the mud near Bastogne. I told him how some mornings I woke up with the name Mallory on my lips and had to remind myself what year it was. He didn't speak much, didn't interrupt, just listened. His eyes welled up a few times, but he didn't cry. He stayed strong, not for him, but for me. When I finished, I expected silence. Maybe discomfort. Instead, he put his hand on my back and said, "Thank you for trusting me." I nodded, unsure what to say, and then he said something I didn't expect. "You know, you were always there for us, even when we didn't know what you were carrying. You showed up. That matters." I looked at him, and for the first time in decades, I let tears fall in front of someone. No shame, no apology, just release. He hugged me, strong and simple. We didn't speak much more that day, but we didn't need to. That silence between us wasn't heavy. It was full. And later that evening, after he left, I sat with Sarah and told her I'd finally told our son. She smiled. "I'm glad," she said. "He's waited a long time to meet that part of you." I nodded. And I realized something. The war didn't end when the bullet stopped, and it didn't end in the cemetery. It ended finally on that porch step when I let someone see me. Not the soldier, not the survivor. Just the man who made it home and didn't know what to do with the memories, and somehow, in telling it, I gave them a place to live outside of me. If you've listened this far, then maybe you understand something that took me most of a lifetime to accept. The war didn't end when I came home. And survival, real survival, isn't about the body. It's about what you do with the years after. I'm 96 now. My hands shake when I drink coffee. I forget where I put my keys. I sit more than I walk. But my mind still walks through fields in France, still hears footsteps in the Ardennes, still feels the weight of that boy's hand slipping from mine, And yet, I've lived a long life. I had a good woman who loved me through every silence. I had children who never gave up trying to know me. I saw seasons change more times than I deserved. And if you ask me what I learned after everything, after bullets and bombs and decades of pretending I was fine, I'd say this. Sometimes surviving hurts more than dying. Because living means carrying. It means facing the empty chairs, the birthdays they never had, the things you never said, and it means learning slowly, painfully to speak, to let people in, even if your voice trembles, even if your memories don't come out clean. I used to think being strong meant saying nothing, holding it all in. But silence doesn't protect you. It cages you. What saved me, in the end, wasn't a helmet or a foxhole. It was a question from a grandson, a hand on my back from a son, a wife who waited 50 years to hear the truth and never asked for anything in return. You don't forget what you saw. You don't stop hearing it when it's quiet at night. But you learn to live with it, to walk beside it. You learn that guilt doesn't go away. It just stops controlling you when you finally look it in the eye. I've learned to forgive myself, not because I was blameless, but because I was human, because I did what I could, because the boy I left behind that day on the ridge, he wouldn't want me to be buried with the silence. He'd want me to tell you that life is fragile, and time is short, and words are heavy, but they can carry healing too. I look at the world now, and I worry. I see people rushing, arguing, trying to win things that don't matter, and I want to grab them by the shoulders and say, slow down. Love better. Listen longer. Call your brother. Say what needs to be said, not tomorrow, now. Because if there's one thing war teaches you, it's that not everyone gets a later. Most of the names I carried are gone, but I remember them. In the space between my words, in the quiet moments of mourning, in the way I touch the photo of Carter, still on my desk, in the pause before I answer when someone says, "Thank you for your service." I used to nod and say, "You're welcome." Now I say, "I remember." Because that's what matters most, that we don't forget, that we don't let silence be the last chapter. And so I leave you with this. If you've heard my story, carry it. Tell someone. Not for me. For them. For the ones who didn't get to grow old. For the ones whose names faded. For the ones who still wake up sweating at night, wondering if they did the right thing. We were young. We were scared. We were just boys trying to survive a world that had lost its mind. And we did survive. Some of us. And we came back. And built things. Quietly. Silently. But now I've spoken. And if this story meant something to you, then maybe I've finally come home for good. And now I ask you, not as a soldier, not as a veteran, but as a man who lived long enough to see the whole picture. What did this story make you feel? And tell me, where are you hearing me from?